have a special guest, Heleta Savo, Dr. class of 06. So yeah, just we're going to keep it a really informal conversation. Feel free to grab some pizza, some drinks like during our conversation. And also, we're going to start with a couple of questions up here and a brief introduction, and then please feel free to ask your own questions. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Heleta Savo. He grew up in Bosnia as a Catholic Serb, and when he was 13, the Bosnian War broke out. So along with the ethnic cleansing of Muslims and other non-Serbs in the region, his family was suspected of being spies for the ethnic majority. So Savo and his family suffered terror, starvation, internment at the hands of the people that were once their neighbors and their friends. Despite all these hardships, Savo was able to leave Bosnia, and eventually he attended St. John's, graduating in 2006. He's also the author of Not My Turn to Die, the story of memoirs of a broken childhood in Bosnia. After St. John's, he earned his master's degree in conflict transformation and management from Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, and he's currently residing in South Africa while getting his PhD in post-conflict development and reconstruction. So Savo, welcome, and if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself to get things started.
Is this on? Okay, I hate microphones because then I can hear myself, and it's, but I guess we can do that this way. I don't want to yell or look like I'm yelling at everybody all this time. Yesterday was the first time for me to be here since my graduation in 2006, and I don't know, I think it's going to take me a while to kind of really, when I think about it on my own, I guess, think about all the feelings and things. I mean, just being in a car, coming, turning by the, getting on the bridge and coming here, it was something else. There was a feeling that I get when I don't see my family. I don't go to Bosnia to see my family for like 2-3 years, and then I finally get a chance to go, and that kind of feeling when you close by to see family, that's how I felt yesterday. It's been amazing, and it was very similar tonight as well, because this place has been okay, I don't know what to call it, second home or third home, because I consider Bosnia as one of my homes, being from there, growing up there, spending my childhood and, well, a good part of my life so far. Then living here for 4 years, and this place having such an influence on me, positive influence, and then living in South Africa as well. I was talking to some people yesterday here, and I was saying how the most difficult question for me is when people ask me where you're from. And it's a long story because I've been to so many different places, and this is one of the places, Bosnia is another place, South Africa, I've been there now for 8 years, picking up a lot of South African accent and the way people do things, and I'm enjoying it. So it's yet another place, another country where I'm letting the place and the people have an influence on me, and I don't have a problem with that. So when people ask me where you're from, I say, well, number one, it's complicated. Number two, from a number of places. But another difficult question that I get is to tell people about myself, because so much has happened. I mean, I had to write a book about part of my life, and it's just a part of my life, because it was very difficult to say it in 5 minutes. And so yeah, I think everything that happened to me, my childhood, the happy part of it, before the war in Bosnia, the war itself, the good and bad things that happened in the war, and then my post-war experience in Bosnia, and coming here, all this had a massive influence on me and kind of shaped the way I am today. And it definitely also shaped my work experience, shaped the choices that I made later on. What to study, what to focus on, what to do today. I do a lot of work in South Africa. I do a lot of research on conflict and post-war, post-conflict environments. And that was definitely influenced by my experience in war in Bosnia. Kind of trying to figure out first why things happen, not just in the Balkans and Bosnia, but all over the world, specifically on the African continent. Why does conflict take place? What are the reasons, causes, and all that, but also how to stop it and what to do when you stop it. Because, well, it's a very difficult process to actually stop a conflict, but then once you stop it, that's just the beginning of a long process of recovery. And I've seen it, how difficult it was in Bosnia. So, sorry, I'm taking too much time. And working on some of these very difficult places like South Sudan, I'm going to do research in northern Somalia, and people keep asking me, especially my friends, South African friends who have read my book, they will say, why do you still have to go to these places? Didn't you have enough? But I don't know, it's my interest, and if I can contribute in a small, tiny little way to research, publications, whatever it is, to figure out how do we get out of it, how do we not repeat the same mistakes again and again. I'll keep doing it and see where it takes me. And just the last thing I want to say is, when I got to St. John's in 2002, I couldn't speak English. Yeah, it sounds funny because I can't stop talking now. And that's how it was. My first year was so stressful because I had to learn English and do everything else, go to class, do assignments and all that. And it took me about 2 years to get where I needed to be. And then went from a shy, not a shy, but quiet person because I couldn't speak properly, to being what I am now. Just can't stop talking. So, which is not a bad thing. I think it helps quite a lot these days.
You touched on this a little bit, but one of the main themes of your book is forgiveness and the role of revenge. Can you speak of your own journey moving on from the war?
Can I make a correction? And there's nothing wrong with, what your question is asking, but in the book, I don't really talk about forgiveness. I'm talking more about moving on and choosing not to hate, choosing not to seek revenge. And the reason why I didn't use the term forgiveness is because I've been struggling in South Africa to really understand how the people who suffered so much were able to actually ask other people who suffered to choose forgiveness and reconciliation over revenge. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu being one of those people who actually was able to convince South Africans, especially South Africans who suffered during apartheid, to choose not to seek revenge, but to accept even the fact that, if those who committed terrible crimes just told what they did, they would get amnesty and they would never have to answer for any of those crimes. Just tell the story. You can say you're sorry. It's not really necessary to do it, and then people will forgive for what was done. And for me, it was just hard to understand. To this day, I'm not sure because I don't know. And I guess since then, since I wrote the book, I became, I would say, even more better person. I would say. I know I shouldn't be talking about it myself that way, but I feel like I'm even more. I'm calmer now than I used to be even then. But I think choosing to move on and not to hate, not to seek any form of to let the past be the past. And what that book that I wrote, what it did for me was I left all the bad things on paper. And since I was telling somebody yesterday, since I wrote the book, since the last time I read it was when I did the last edit before printing. And I never took it to read it again, almost because I just wanted to leave the past. And what I keep with me are the good things. Whoever read the book, you'll remember that there are a lot of bad things that happened to my family, but if it wasn't for good people who sometimes risk their lives to help us, we wouldn't survive. I decided to keep this with me and leave other things behind, and not feel any bitterness or anything. If I see people today who did bad things to my family, I don't feel anything. I don't need, there's nothing. I won't even give them a bad look, let alone say something. And in a way, I guess I wasn't a strong enough person, I'm probably not strong enough to this day to think about forgiveness on the level that many South Africans decided to choose to go that way. So I guess, I'll give myself 20 years and see what I can do in that front.
What role can the international community play in efforts to promote reconstruction and moving forward?
I wrote a PhD on that, and it's like 450 pages. To summarize that, I should just Google my abstracts. I think the international community could do, and I'm using the term could do quite a lot, but so far I'm not seeing a lot of good examples. Think about Iraq, think about Afghanistan, think about Bosnia. Wherever international community decides to get heavily involved, we're not seeing stability. In Bosnia, the international community chose a colonial approach at the end of 20th century, going into 21st century. How can anybody in their right mind use the colonial approaches, which didn't work anyway, ever, which created mess in Africa, in Southeast Asia, everywhere where it was attempted, anything like that. In Bosnia, the international community would say, okay, Bosnians should go and vote in the elections and choose their local representatives, their national representatives, all that stuff. But if we don't like what those politicians do, we're going to fire them. I mean, is that how you promote democracy? Or what the US did in Iraq, sending 20-year-olds, with all respect, 20-year-olds, to write Iraqi constitution or to set up Iraqi institutions, very important institutions, just because these recent graduates were working in somebody's office in State Department, all of a sudden they are setting up a new country. I mean, it's not going to work. And what I'm trying to say is that a lot can be done, and these countries need so much help. So how about we try to do it the right way? I've seen young people from Europe and the US in South Sudan who were sent by the governments to be special advisors to ministers and people in the office of the president of the country. And they had no clue about this place. They had they read a book or two on the plane, and just before they came. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? How come that the international community spent a crazy amount of money, and I'm sorry that I'm using that term, but they spent so much money in Bosnia on recovery, rebuilding, and all that stuff, state building and all that. And still to this day, Bosnia is one of the most dysfunctional, poor countries in the world. Something is wrong somewhere. It's easy to blame Bosnians for everything, and I do blame Bosnian politicians for so many things, but it's not only their fault. I think the whole process was wrong in so many ways. I think we need to find a way to do it properly, because we shouldn't be wasting time, effort, money, and then also leaving behind such a mess, where people will easily go back to conflict because nothing is working, and they have nothing to lose. So.
Great, thank you. We're going to open it up to all of you right now. So Diana will walk around with a microphone and just raise your hand if you're interested in asking a question.
Anyone? Hi, my name's Mackenzie. Hi, my name's Mackenzie Gibbert, and I just want to thank you so much for being here. My question is, what do you define as the proper way to recover from something like this? I mean, if you were a policymaker yourself, what would you do or recommend to clean up Bosnia, or to go back and do it and do it the right way?
I think one way to do it would be to help build local capacity in order to, and let the people define their country, what they want to do, how they want to do it, the way they want to develop the infrastructure, the economy, the political system. It shouldn't be decided by somebody else, because at the end of the day, those outsiders come and go, and whatever they leave behind, local people have to live with it. And if they didn't choose it, there is nothing that will keep that system going. And I can use an example of South Africa. South Africans fought for democracy. South Africans fought for freedom and democracy, and the system that was developed by South Africans themselves. And South Africans will fight to make sure that the system and democracy and the freedoms that come with the constitution and all that are protected. I'm not seeing that many people in Iraq or Bosnia or Afghanistan defending the system, the constitution, and the political institutions that were designed by somebody else. And it's because you didn't ask us about this. An example, the Dayton Peace Agreement that was signed at the end of 1995 was fully written by mainly American diplomats. That document became Bosnian constitution. For about a year or two, wasn't even translated into the local language. To this day, this is the Bosnian constitution. Bosnians had nothing to do with it. Not even read it before it was signed. So how can we do this? So in a way, and I'm talking now about we try to do, from South Africa, try to do something in South Sudan, for example. We shouldn't be imposing our ways. South Africa had a way to end its own conflict, write its new constitution, which many consider to be the most democratic in the world. But that still shouldn't give South Africans the right to impose that constitution that works for South Africa onto somebody else. And I did research in Somaliland, which is a northern part. Well, it's a northern part of Somalia. It's called by many people an oasis of sanity in the very troubled Horn of Africa. It's a very interesting society, and they decided to proclaim independence in the beginning of the early 90s. The international community focusing on the Balkans, the rest of Somalia that was such a mess, well, still is, never paid any attention to Somaliland, and they had to do whatever they could on their own. And they designed a political system, the economy, everything on their own. And however poor their living think that system would work really well if there was help. So instead of letting societies completely fix themselves on their own, we can offer constructive support without imposing our values or systems or ideas or things like that. It's easier said than done, but I think it's the only way for us to help our societies. Really.
All right, any other questions?
Hi, Lucas Easy. You kind of are describing like self-determination for these areas. But is a democratic system synonymous with that self-determination? And like, is an American imposed democracy like the right solution for every area?
I'm not sure. I'm not afraid to say I don't know, really. I think promoting democracy, there's nothing wrong with that. But imposing democracy, it's so wrong. It's like completely the opposite of what you're trying to do. I wouldn't want to live in a system that's not democratic. But there are societies where it's very difficult, where for some whatever reason people don't want that. I'd like to see us working more on making democracy attractive than imposing democracy. Show to people why that system is better. What are the benefits? What are the benefits for people, for politicians, for all that, instead of imposing it? So, and look, I've done a lot of research, but I don't have the answers. Really, I haven't tested all my arguments on countries.
So in February of this year, there were a lot of protests and movements in Bosnia surrounded around working conditions and kind of the economic situation. And Tina Seslica, works for Foundation Mosaic in Bosnia, and part of her argument when I talked to her this summer was that there might be a way to pursue economic development in Bosnia instead of political development in a way that would kind of maybe divorce some of the ethnic politics from economic benefits as well. So to kind of, if you could redistribute that, that might break the logjam in the politics. Have you seen that do you see that in South Africa? Have you seen that in other places you've studied? And what do you think that these movements in Bosnia were something that can move forward? Or do you see them as just kind of like a small interruption in a larger story about ethnic politics?
I've been following. I go to Bosnia to visit for a few weeks and then I go away. But I've been following the protests. There were large protests in Bosnia in February of this year. There were protests also last year, and I'm surprised that there aren't more and more of those protests in the country. The economic situation is shocking. I cannot believe that people keep quiet. About 55% of young people under the age of, I think, 30 are unemployed. And there is no hope for them to get any employment. There's a lot of how do you call it, underemployment, where you work but you're not making enough to actually survive. But yet, despite all that, there was a protest in February, and it kind of died down after a few weeks, in a month. And the politicians in Bosnia they know how to do this. They just make sure that they don't hurt anybody, nobody dies. Don't give people reasons to continue protesting and kind of take government down, take their part, like during the Arab Spring in some of the countries. And they just let it go until people get tired. And people do get tired and just stop it completely. I would love to see a way to divorce economic development and politics, but the problem is that the politicians are the ones who actually control all this. They are the ones who make the policies, and they are the ones who control the budget and all that. And what I've seen in Bosnia, what I've seen in many other countries is once things get hard, when there's huge unemployment and all that, politicians will find ways to get people to think about other things or to talk about other things and not focus so much on the suffering and not being able to feed your family and all that. So what they will do in Bosnia, they will just get people to again talk about the differences. Remember what they did to you, and in Bosnia they go back to the 14th century. I mean, what? Why is that important today and food on the table is not important? I mean, even what happened in the 90s, I mean, forget about it. I mean, can you read those history books? What can you read? Can you eat those history books? You know? How about you cook that for your kids? Why is this so important and not the basics? I mean, and people in Bosnia are suffering on all three sides. There's poverty, and it's shocking, but the politicians just know how to play it around, and they just know how to do it. And I'd love to see change in Bosnia. I'd love to see it, but it's not happening. And recently there were elections in Bosnia. 2 out of 3 political parties, nationalist parties, that took country into the war in the early 90s, won again. I don't know. I kind of just said, you know what, there you go. I'm getting tired of thinking because, you know, and I don't live there, so I'm kind of like I'm a commentator by now, you know, but I feel sorry for my family, they live there. And I have friends who live there, and you know, they don't have choices and options and things like I do. So it's a very sad story.
Alright, we're going to take another question here, but I just want to remind everyone there's a lot of pizza left, so if you're still hungry, like, feel free to grab some. On that note, any further questions? So we're going to go back to Anna, seeing what she's got some.
Well, I was in the country this summer with the Center for Global Education internship program. I talked to a lot of youth who are interested in moving out of the country, and I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that. If I believe it's 65% of youth want to leave, what do you see the future of Bosnia being?
Well, it's scary. It really is. I recently saw there was a report that kind of looked at how many educated people, and what about university education, people like us, how many educated people left Bosnia because of the war and then after the war. And it's something like 70–80%. And these people are not going back. So when we talk about economic development, who's going to do it? And people just get fed up and don't want to go back. And the younger generations who are now getting education in Bosnia, they only hope is to leave the country. I know a lot of university-educated young people in Bosnia who work in coffee shops because that's the only work they can get. And you know, I don't know what's going to take to inspire them, to get them to actually think about something bigger, you know. I mean, sometimes I feel like I shouldn't be talking about things that I do and where I travel and all that stuff because it's like a different world, you know, and you know, it'll sound like I'm just bragging and all that stuff. So it's like just keep talking about sports and coffee and stuff like that, you know, the easy topics, because you know, it's, to make a long story short, it's really scary. And what's the future? And this is a small country, 2.5 million people, and 60% of young people want to leave. I guess that's why the European Union is worried about, you making Bosnia one of its members, because then everybody's going to leave and Bosnia is going to continue to be Europe's problem, problem child, and never-ending issues and all that stuff. Yeah, so I really would like to see change, things improving, but it's very interesting. When I go to Bosnia, when I'm about to get there, I'm very excited to see friends and family and all that, and I go there, and it just after a few days, excited to see everybody, and then you have a reality check about the situation and all that, and it's all of a sudden just like, this is terrible.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, all right. Professor.
Really quick question. How's the EU influenced the reconstruction of Bosnia since the war? Do you have any thoughts on this? How it's influenced the Bosnians go through this, or?
They've been doing things, but I'm struggling to see results, positive results. I mean, we're talking about massive unemployment, huge political mess, all that, and then, in a lot of their reports, things look very nice. They just talk about all the achievements and all that, and then you realize that, if you go to Sarajevo, and I know a number of people here work in Sarajevo, Banja Luka, Mostar. Sarajevo is the capital of the country, and then Banja Luka and Mostar are kind of regional centers, and things are, there are opportunities and all that, bigger cities, all that stuff. You get out of those places, it's just blooming. And they didn't do a good job. I have to say that. I spoke to somebody who works for the EU mission, and we were talking about my current research is looking quite a lot on how to rebuild higher education institutions and systems after conflict. And what I'm finding is that it's nobody's priority. Nobody cares about it. Local authorities in these countries don't care about it. International community doesn't care about it whatsoever. UN, World Bank, you name it. Nobody cares about it. There are a lot of other priorities, and yes, those should be priorities. Basic education, primary education is a priority because it's seen as a humanitarian issue. There's healthcare, there's infrastructure development, emergencies, and all this stuff. When you talk about higher education, they say, well, no, that's a luxury. But the problem is, if you don't have a higher education system, who's going to develop a critical mass of people who can actually build a country, develop it? There are a lot of, in the aftermath of conflict, if the international community is focusing on the country, they come in with diplomats and all kinds of people, aid workers and all that. So you have these people kind of replacing because there's lack of local capacity, these guys come in. And these guys leave, there's a vacuum, there's nobody there. And if you don't have a higher education system that can develop local capacity, forget it. And I use this term, just forget it, there's no hope. And a friend of mine who works for the EU in Bosnia, he said, wow, that's quite interesting because really we never paid any attention to the higher education system in Bosnia. And it's been now, what, 20 years? So when are we going to actually start focusing on that? And maybe we have such bad political leadership because they bought their diplomas. And I know some of the people who were in Bosnia probably heard stories about private universities in Bosnia are the places where you just go and buy your degree because you need it to apply for a job. You get it in 3 days. You just need to pay. So I was sorry to sound so negative. Can you talk about what? Can you talk about Johnny football or something? I know it's good this year. Something different.
So, what brought you to St. John's, and how did your experience at St. John's change your perspective on maybe, maybe it did not, but in your introduction, you kind of talked about your book, moving on, and so two quick questions. One, what brought you to St. John's? How did you feel about it? And two, how did St. John's, how did St. John's help you in the transformation process or the moving on process?
So the first question was, how did I find out about St. John's? Okay. It's one of those long stories. I used to work for a youth leadership program in Bosnia, and the program was funded by the Whalen Family Foundation. And I believe a lot of you probably will know about Dan Whalen. Wasn't he the president of St. John's for a bit, for a while? Not long ago? And Dan and his foundation did, I mean, what they've done for so many young people in Bosnia is just, it's unbelievable. Supporting this youth leadership program over many years, and then I was part of it for a few years. I was part of the program as a participant, and then I was working in the program for 2 years. And one day, it was myself and a few of my Bosnian friends who were approached by them, and he told us he wanted to know if, if we had any other plans or ideas about our future. He wanted to know, what those are and if he can help somehow. And it was very difficult for us to actually, say about it and ask for something because he's done so much for us up to that point. But somehow he was really, I don't use the term pressuring us, but asking us, so please, what would you like to do? Is there something else, something different? And I said, well, if I could get an opportunity to go and study. I finished high school in Bosnia and couldn't go to university because my family could only support my sister going to university. And so I said, if I could get a chance, I would like to go to university. And then he told me, well, okay, well, pick a country, pick a school, and I'll help you fully to go get your undergraduate degree. And wow, I mean, the whole world, just everything, I don't know, that feeling was something else. And I told him without thinking, he told me, we can think about it and, let me know. I said, no, I'll just go to the same university you went to. He went to St. John's. And, well, I did think about it a few times when I experienced my first Minnesota winter, but it was one of the best choices I've made in my life. What this place has done for me, the small community, the people who are met here, for professors who through the conversations and the classes definitely made me a better person. Got me to become to think critically about everything, to always ask questions, and I know sometimes people get annoyed because I will never stop asking questions. The people, friends that I made, my friends who went with me on a study project to South Africa, who actually wanted to hear my story about the war, and they actually then convinced me to write about it. And that's why I wrote the book. But my friend said, you know what, it's an important story to tell. And I told them, why would anybody care? This is 2005, there are wars all over the place. Now it's not really care about a story somebody's story from Bosnia. But it was my friends who actually said, well, it's very important, we should do it and all that. But it was this community that kind of, changed me. I really became a better person. And, in the book I write about that angry me, which is not very fun. And this place helped me become who I am today. And the choices that I've made later on, and things that I do now, if it wasn't for St. John's and the people at St. Ben's, I would never get anywhere out of here. Second question.
Well, I'm in various kind of having
What was said? So I
Does anyone else have any questions?
Oh, we got that.
Can you hear me? I presume the purpose of the Wayland Foundation and funding yourself and other students in Bosnia to come to school here was that at some point you could go back home again and await the 11th in the Bosnian society and have some helpful ideas. But it seems like in spite of that effort, the situation is not good in Bosnia. And I wonder, what do you think that is due to? Was there not enough of a critical mass of people with good ideas coming back to the country, or were there other forces that stymied the efforts that you might make, or what's happening?
You mentioned, perhaps not having a big critical mass of people, and I think that's the case. The Wayland Family Foundation helped something like 150 of us from all parts of Bosnia, and I know those people, and all of us, and I know where we started and how we were from all different parts of the country, from different ethnic backgrounds. Most of us went through really bad things in the war. In the beginning, you're not sure you should, talk to those people, other people, should you trust them, and then you become best friends and you work together, you want to change the country, you change each other in the process. But it's only 150 of us in a big country, and going back, and I know I have some of my friends who went back to Bosnia, and some of them went to Harvard and got master's degrees and all that. They could work anywhere in the US, but they were struggling to get a job in Bosnia, especially in the government, because you don't want critical thinkers in the government, and that's the biggest problem. We don't want people with skills and capacity. And another thing is, in Bosnia, which is a very, what the war did, divided the country on 3 ethnic lines. So now, people get jobs in the government because you need this many Bosnian Serbs, or this many Bosnian Croats, this many Bosnian Muslims. And, you just get the people based on their ethnicity. A lot of times, you get people based on their ethnicity and not because they can do the job. And one of the reasons I want to go back to Bosnia is because I will always be known as that, my name can tell my ethnicity. And I will always be known as that person, and he's this or that ethnicity. I mentioned yesterday in one of our conversations that I just don't have time for that in my life. I want to do things based on what I can do, and be judged on what I can or cannot do, and not what my name is or what my ethnicity is or whatever it is. And I think that in a lot of these places that have bad leadership, leaders are afraid of people with critical thinking. people with skills, people who can easily replace them when we think about skills and knowledge and capacity. And I've seen it, I've done a lot of work in South Sudan, and I've seen this so many times. South Sudanese have been fighting for about 5-6 decades, with a little bit of peace in between. And a lot of people that I've been working with, and most people, if not all people in the government, are former rebels who never had a chance. They were fighting for 2 decades in the last war, and they never had a chance to get education. So they're now in the government. A lot of South Sudanese had to leave in those 2 decades of the war. Had to leave. They left as kids. They were refugees. There are some in Minnesota. They are all over the U.S., Canada, Australia, all over the place. And a lot of them now are highly educated. I met so many of them through my work. They go back to South Sudan because they feel they need to go back and give back and contribute in whatever way they can, or whatever way they can. There is no way for them to get in to do what they can, because those former rebels, people who never went to school, they tell them that, where were you when I was fighting? And now you want to take my job, and I was fighting and all that. So the country has the leadership that cannot do anything. And they're turning away South Sudanese who have great skills. So they go back and they teach in American universities. They work in the US. They work all over the place because I'm not saying their country doesn't want them, but the leadership of their country doesn't want them. And at the same time, they come to South Africa, they come to us and they say, well, we don't have capacity, you need to help us. I mean, you're turning away your own capacity. People are coming to you and begging you for a job so they can do something. It's difficult. And it's very similar in Bosnia. So, how to change that, how to fix that? I don't know. We need to make some small steps somewhere around and do it. But in the case of us and in Bosnia, people are doing great work. And I know those of you who've been to Bosnia for your internship or went to visit, and those guys are my friends. They're doing amazing things. They're making huge difference, but it's still small scale. I'm hoping it's going to expand as we go, and I would love to help them, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
All right, so just about time to wrap up. We have time for one more question from the audience, and then maybe one more question from the panel. Otherwise, I'm just going to aim it for the last word then.
Okay, what are you doing now? Research in South Africa. What are your future plans? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
For about a year and a half now, I was finally done with my PhD research. Well, what a feeling when I finished that. It was huge. For about a year and a half, I've been working at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in our Office for International Education. And I'm doing research on international higher education, and specifically how to internationalize our university, focusing mainly on internationalization at home. And the reason why we do that is because most of our South African students, because of the socioeconomic issues and history and lack of funding, never get a chance to travel abroad and gain experience. Many of you here probably are thinking about going abroad and have been abroad. I've been studying abroad all my life. And so in today's world, not being able to gain enough knowledge and skills to enable you to work in a very interconnected world is we're not doing enough for our students if we're not prepared for the world. So we're not going to be able to send all our students abroad. It's just never going to happen. a very small number of our students go abroad. So how do we improve our education system at our university so that students, even though they don't go abroad, we can still prepare them for the world. So how do we internationalize our curriculum? How do we help our own academics, perhaps send them abroad so that when they come back, they have more skills to actually teach the students about the world? How do we utilize international students like yourself, if you come to South Africa, to engage with our students and all that? So I do a lot of that stuff. Do practical stuff around it and do a lot of research around it. I also do that research about how to help rebuild higher education systems so that countries or people in these countries that are struggling coming out of conflict don't depend on only outside assistance, but they have their own universities that can provide quality education so that people cannot afford to go abroad. The rich few in these countries can go abroad and study elsewhere, but the majority cannot. And what hope do they have for the future? So, and what hope do those countries have if only a tiny little mass of people can go to university? So that's my research. It's very fun. I don't know, I'm one of those crazy people that loves to do research and read and read and read, and I love to do that. Quite happy in Port Elizabeth, where we are at our university. I'm from Bosnia, and those who were in Bosnia, far away from the sea and all that, will know that if you put a Bosnian now next to the Indian Ocean, he's going to be so happy to go anywhere. So that's where I am right now, and kind of that's where I'm going to be for a while. But I would love to come to St. John, St. Ben's as much as possible. It's a homecoming for me. So, and I love to engage with our students. Students from here who come to South Africa. And the plan is to get more and more involved. What I do sometimes is after my work, I would just go to the senior seminar class and just sit there. And we did it before. That's my professor that took us to South Africa in 2005, and so kind of just want to feel it again.
You made us proud.
Thank you. And I really like this format, beer and politics and do you mind if we try to do something in South Africa like this?
Yeah, road trip.
We do have good beer.
Yeah, you do.
We do have better wine, so we might do wine and politics and we'll see.
Well, thank you so much. If no one else has any questions, I'm going to direct this to Tyler.
All right, thank you very much, Anna. Let's give a big round of applause to Savo. We got for you a politics in a pint glass and a couple pens in there too for you to take with you. So
It's my new beer bottle.
Exactly. A couple McCarthy Center events to keep on your radar. Next Tuesday, we have a great networking opportunity at Dazzle, which will be in the cities. We have busing down there. Feature a lot of alums that are currently engaged in public service. So if you're interested in that, look for it on the McCarthy Center website. You can also find it in a couple emails that will be sent out later this week. Also, we have a TED Talk Tuesday with the Communications Department next Tuesday in the McCarthy Center. And if you're didn't catch the exact topic of that, Aaron, you want to give a little pitch for it really quick?
So we're going to be watching a TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story with Chimamanda Adichie. It's a really good one. Madhu Mitra from the English department will be moderating along with Katie Johnson from the Communications department. So if you're able to come to that, it's going to be a great discussion.
So just email the center and RSVP if you're interested in that. And with that, we will let you get out of here. Make sure you grab some pizza on your way out. We still have a lot of pizza left over, so we'll see you next time.